Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Africans Arise. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ellie, and in this video, we're going to be continuing with my read-through or reflections, I should say, on this book here, which is called Metu Neter Vol.2 Anuk Osar, and it's by Ra Un Nefer Amen. So yeah, we're going to get straight into it. If you haven't already subscribed, then do subscribe to the channel. That would be much appreciated. And yeah, let us do this. So I'm just going to quickly check a couple of things here. Boom, boom, boom. That's fine. Okay, so this video today is called "What is Paut Neteru?" or AKA the Kemetic Tree of Life. And it's a good question. When I first heard about the Kemetic Tree of Life, I kind of thought I really wasn't sure what it meant. I thought it meant I thought it was something to do with the Bible, you know, in the Tree of Life in Genesis, where Adam and Eve are in the garden and they're told not to eat from the Tree of Life and so forth. I thought it's something to do with that, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people probably have a similar thought. When they first hear this term, the Tree of Life, they probably think it's something to do with the Bible, Tree of Life. But I've talked about this in my last few videos already, about what this Tree of Life concept is. And in this video, we're going to look through chapter 4, I think it is. Where are we? Yeah, chapter 4 of the book. And the title of chapter 4 is The Making of the Tree of Life. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what this concept of the Tree of Life is. Now, the first thing to say about the Kemetic Tree of Life is that it basically, to give a basic overview, first of all, the Kemetic Tree of Life, as explained by Ra Un Nefer Amen, is a twofold thing. It's an explanation of the ancient Egyptian view of creation, how the world came into being, and the word for that is cosmology. So the Tree of Life was a way for them to explain their understanding of cosmology, how the cosmos, or the universe, I should say, came into being. But secondly, it's also, as well as being that, and perhaps more importantly, it's also a tool with which humans could use to guide them in their process of self-development, self-discovery, of ascending from a lower state of being, a lower level of being, to a higher level of being, a higher state of consciousness. So that's basically the first thing that I'll say right off the bat as to what the Kemetic understanding, or what Ra Un Nefer Amen's explanation is with regard to the Kemetic Tree of Life. And what I'm going to do is read a little bit. I'll read a few snippets from the book, from the Kemetic Tree of Life, and I'm on page 59. This is a really good summary here. He says, "The Tree of Life is a classification system composed of 11 categories, wherein is classified all aspects of reality and their relationship to each other. Certain key attributes of God, so-called deities, Neteru, we talked about that in my last video, serve as the theme or underlying principle of each set or category. These were arranged in descending order according to their role in the process of creation, i.e. differentiation." Now, what I want to just say there is, just to re-emphasize that point there, is that the attributes of God, the attributes of Neter, are represented or symbolized by these so-called deities, i.e. the Neteru, the gods, quote unquote gods of ancient Kemet. And they were used in this Tree of Life, this Tree of Life schema to represent attributes of God. And it says, these were arranged in descending order according to their role in the process of creation, i.e. differentiation, and their maintenance of unity. Since this is a process of differentiation, the most important function is the tracing of the maintenance of unity in the midst of increasing differentiation. Order is the means through which the natural and inherent unity is maintained in the host of differentiated existences. Now, That's an important point. An important point, again, this is, well, he's going to talk about it later on, but he's basically talking about the transformation from undifferentiated matter, which was the state of existence before creation, to differentiated matter, things, separated things. And what he's saying is that in that process of creating different things, there has to be some sort of order, some sort of system behind it all, if you like. And this is what the Tree of Life is outlining. He says, throughout their history, different schools of philosophy came up with different accounts of this classification system. The function of the Kemetic Tree of Life has been distorted by negative and perverted reporting by Westerners of the differences in these accounts. If the Kamal, the people of Kemet, were treated by Westerners as the latter treat themselves, i.e. the Westerners treat themselves, then the latter would have explained that these different versions came about for the same reasons that in the Western world there are different philosophical or scientific or theological views of the same subject. So that's an important point there. So that's a little snippet there, but so we've seen there that the Tree of Life, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up an image of the Tree of Life, because obviously that would be very helpful as far as actually being clear about what we're talking about here. So just give me 2 seconds. Let me just bring up the image here. And if you're watching, then please make sure that you click the like button. Do click the like button. That will help the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, and that will help. The algorithm helps to get the video out to different people. So do, if you can, like the video. So this is the Tree of Life image here. There we go. Yeah, that's the Tree of Life there. I might enlarge it. Yeah, so hopefully you can see that. This is the Tree of Life. This is what Ra Un Nefer Amen is talking about. And you can see there, it's got all of these different entities here. So you've got at the top here, Amen, and at the bottom here, Geb. These are all names of what you call so-called gods, Seker, Tehuti. Some of them are more famous than others in our circles. Ma'at, Heru, Oset, Osar. They're the more famous ones. And Ra Un Nefer Amen is saying that those entities are in the Tree of Life, Kemetic Tree of Life, are said to symbolize the process of creation, which goes from the top to the bottom, from undifferentiated to differentiation. And the differentiation gets more and more pronounced, more and more developed, the lower down the tree that you go. So there's this term in the Metu Neter, the term for the Tree of Life is actually Paut Neteru. And I, until very recently, I thought that just meant Tree of Life, even though I knew that Neteru doesn't mean life. But I thought, oh, okay, maybe Paut means tree, and Neteru must somehow mean life. But Ra Un Nefer Amen has got a good explanation as to where that actual terminology comes from on page 60. He says this: in the everyday language of the Kemetic people, that is the word Paut, denotes a cake, bread, etc. It was drafted into philosophy and its essence extracted to denote the plastic formative substance of the world. As such, it represents the first material manifestation of undifferentiated matter, i.e. Nu. Since the material substance of the world, Nu, is infinite, the world occurs in a finite portion separated for the purpose of creation. The portion that is thus separated becomes the objective realm. The name Paut was given to the first stage of the objective realm, which is composed of undifferentiated objective matter. In the Memphite cosmogony, it is referred to as Tatenen, which is Ta is land and Tenen is inert. Within it, the entire creation will take place according to an order in which all things and events will be assigned a place in time and space, classified in one of the 10 categories in of the Tree of Life. So, yeah, what it's talking about there is that, like, the term Paut is to do with substance. The substance of the universe is this undifferentiated substance, matter, energy, which is infinite and undefined, undefinable. So they use this term, which in normal everyday terminology meant bread or cake, but they use that term to talk about the substance with which the universe is made of. So Paut Neteru, Neteru again is those gods, so-called gods, the which are actually the aspects of the divine, attributes of the divine, and so you have Paut Neteru, which eventually people today I hear this term Paut Neteru. People say company of the gods, company of the deities. Terms on those lines. But Ra Un Nefer Amen basically says that the tree of life, let me read it earlier here. He says, I have used the name Tree of Life, even though the Kamau did not refer to it as such. They used the name Paut Neteru. But as any student of Kabbalah, of the pantheon of deities and the cosmologies around the world will readily recognize. But any student of Kabbalah, of the pantheon of deities, and of the cosmologies around the world would readily recognize the Tree of Life in the Kemetic Paut Neteru. So this term, the term, the Tree of Life, is how it's defined in other cosmologies. And Ra Un Nefer Amen is basically saying that the Paut Neteru is like the Kemetic version of this Tree of Life, which you also find in other cosmologies, in other systems such as Kabbalah. So he then goes on to talk about, on page 61, he then goes on to talk about how there are many different versions, even in Kemet, there are many different versions of the Paut Neteru. And he makes a really interesting point on page 61. He basically says that, yeah, there were very many different versions with lots of different Neteru in the different versions, and he says, so what's the best, how do you go about, for him, he says the best way of determining what the best version, the most accurate, the most version of the Paut Neteru is to look at what is the most useful version. And he says on page 61, he says the question regarding its composition, as well as which version of the collection is the most useful, can only be answered by keeping in mind that all insight into cosmogony, i.e. how God creates the world, derives its value from what it teaches us about ourselves, as above, so below. So, what is meant by this is that the sages resolve the problem by referring their intuitions of the creation process to the mental and psychical processes in man. They discovered that the proper version of the collection of Neteru gave so much power to those who lived by it that they kept it a secret. And anyway, it carries on. And then he basically says that this understanding of the Paut Neteru was kept secret, hidden in the mystery schools and so forth, so-called mystery schools, because a true understanding of this Paut Neteru actually gives man insight into our own development, into our own powers, our own mental and psychic powers that we have, psychic powers that we have. And so it was, not something that can be readily put into the hands of just any old person, So they kept it secret. But what Ra Un Nefer Amen says that, no, it's time for it to be revealed. He says the time has come to remove the seals from Nehed Kau, which are Kau, I'm not sure what that means. And so he says this is the, and it says in another book, in other places, he talks in more detail about which are the most accurate versions of the Paut Neteru. But his basic point is that this, for him, is the, he is, through in his understanding, this is the most accurate version. So then we get into the Paut Neteru itself. Let's look at a few elements of the Paut Neteru, looking from the cosmological side of things in this video. So at the top here, you have 0. What's this all about? 0, Amen, Amun. Now, if you know from previous videos, Amun or Amen was the Kemetic word meaning hidden, unseen, referring to the fact that the one consciousness is unseen. And Ra Un Nefer Amen says this, says, it begins with the source of all, the subjective realm, and its corresponding state of pure consciousness, will, and energy, matter. It is assigned the cipher 0 to symbolize the absence of things and events, yet composed on the immaterial side of consciousness, will, and intelligence, and on the material side of undifferentiated matter and inert energy. We saw in the past chapter, and I looked at in my previous video, that this aspect of God is essentially, its essential state corresponds to Atem, Amen, Nu, Hehu, etc. It continues with the mental faculties of the Supreme Being, which are classified in 9 categories. So, yeah, Amen is the hidden, undifferentiated subjective realm, both the immaterial being the consciousness and the material being the matter energy, which is Neter in its inert state, if you like. Then he says, going through the rest of the tree now, he says that it continues with the mental faculties of the Supreme Being, which are classified in 9 categories. These are the means through which the order underlying the physical world is created. To these are assigned the numbers 1 through 9. It ends with the final category, under which are contained all physical events and manifestations, from protons to universes. It is symbolized by the number 10. So it goes from top to bottom. Top, undifferentiated, oneness, singular, Neter, and at the very bottom here, individual items, right down to the most minute of individual objects, which are, he talks about protons and photons and whatnot. So that's on the cosmological side of things. That is what the Tree of Life, Paut Neteru, is describing. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to talk briefly about the top 3, the higher levels here, because time doesn't allow to go through all of the different elements in detail. But I'll talk in a little bit of detail with regard to sphere 1, Osar or Wasir, sphere 2, Tehuti or Jehuti, and sphere 3, which is Sekeret. And so these spheres are representative of the manifestation of Neter. So Neter here is the if you want to call it the subjective realm, but here is the manifestation, talking about how the Neter first manifests itself into the objective realm. So let's read it here. It says, page 62, it says, before creation can begin, Neter must first transform itself from subjective to objective being. All the schools of Kemetic spiritual science are in agreement that this was accomplished through the utterance by Neter of the name for its objective state of being. This is the Hekau, word of power, Ankh, hieroglyphically represented by the so-called Ankh cross, which I'm sure you've all heard of. It is the Kemetic counterpart of the Indus Kush Aum, or Aum, the Masai name of the Supreme Being, which is Ngai, and so on. Originally, the priest of Anu conceived the fifth dynasty conceived this objectification of the attributes of the subjective being in a symbol that combined the energy, matter with the consciousness, intelligence, will aspects of God. This is Ra. And he goes on to talk about, how this symbol of, so what he's saying here, initially this sphere amongst the priests of Anu, this sphere was termed Ra, which combined the energy and the consciousness elements of Neter. And he talks about how that was the Ra was the symbolization for that. But over time, it proved too complex because it brought too many things together into one symbol, which made it not very, and let me read it here, basically made it not as useful for use of people, in our own spirit, in the spiritual development, spiritual science. And he says here on page 66, he says, I'll read it here. He says, keeping in mind that the ultimate goal of cosmology, which is the study of cosmogony, is the understanding of self, the raw conceptualization of the highest aspect of God's manifestation did not integrate with the fact that at this level, one finds a separation of being from one's faculties of creation, which are all combined in the symbol of Ra. In other words, where are we? In other words, while the faculties of creativity can be totally at rest, the self is forever conscious. This led the sages to seek for another conceptualization for this state of being. This led to the Osarian symbolization of the highest manifested aspect of God. While Ra is consciousness, will, dwelling in the active radiant energy of life, Osar is consciousness dwelling in an inert and dead body, which, although dead, is still the prime objective source of life. No empty rhetoric here. It corresponds to the altered state of consciousness, Samadhi, Sechet Hetepu, wherein the altered state of consciousness, wherein is experienced a great peace and relaxation, death-like state, that is a prerequisite for the manifestation of our spiritual power. In this state, there is a cessation of all activities but consciousness. Thus, we can understand the hieroglyphic symbolization of Osar, an eye representing consciousness under or besides a seat, representing the state of trance as well as its metaphor, a mummy. In this manner, Osar is made to only represent the first sphere of the Tree of Life, pure, objective, omniscient consciousness, in contrast to Ra, which combines consciousness with the power of the word and the spiritual power, which are actually spheres 2 and 3. In addition, as we will later see, the Osarian conceptualization of the highest aspect of manifested divinity of God and man is a better guide in our efforts to realize our divinity. So that's really, really important, and really that's important to note that, the Paut Neteru, the system, the Paut Neteru schema system is not something that's just, as I said in my last video, it's not something that's just meant to be an interesting conversation about, where did creation come from, but rather it's something that actually is meant to meant to be the bedrock, a foundation for our own spiritual, psychological development. So Osar, on the one hand, is more defined than the Ra symbolization, which Ra actually covered lots of different aspects. All three different aspects, whereas Osar was able to just be focused on the consciousness in an inert state, a state of sleep, if you like, stillness. And also that then corresponds with something that I'm going to talk about in future videos, how when we elevate to that higher level of consciousness, then we can also enter into that state of stillness, of a death-like state, a trance state, wherein we are just consciousness, which is still, which is inert. So yeah, that's really powerful for me. And then briefly, let's talk about sphere 2, which is Tehuti, and sphere 3, which is Seket. Ra Un Nefer Amen talks about how sphere 2, Tehuti, talks about divine will and wisdom, and sphere 3 is about spiritual power. And he says something. I like the way he talks about. Well, let's quickly talk about sphere 2 first of all. He says something really interesting. He talks about how divine will and wisdom was. The creation was done in accordance with divine wisdom. So the idea is that the Neter or Sar creates using, wills the creation. So that's Tehuti, the wisdom of creation, wills creation. That's the will of Neter. And he does the creation via the spiritual power, the hakao, the word, let there be, as you might say from other traditions. And what he says is that no other cosmologies have this idea of creation being done in accordance to. Well, let me read it. Let me not paraphrase him. Let's read what he says here. He says that. He says that. Where is it? The creation is done according to wisdom. And of course, I've not put the page number for it, but basically, what this reminds me of, I come from a biblical background. My background, Christian kind of background, theological background, and this idea of creation being done according to wisdom, is familiar from someone who might know the Hebrew scriptures and the Greek scriptures, the New Testament. But the thing to remember is that when we're talking here about the Paut Neteru, we're talking about things that were put down thousands of years before Abraham was born, thousands of years before the Bible even got written, let alone composed. So when we read it, for example, if you read Proverbs number 8 in the Bible and John chapter 1, it talks about how wisdom or the word was there alongside God. All things in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God, all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made, and so forth. There's this idea, and it was also Proverbs chapter 8 talks about wisdom. It personifies wisdom as a female and says, wisdom, I was there with God when he made everything, and he delighted in me as he made things and so forth. That's when you're looking now here, what you're looking at here in the Paut Neteru, you're looking at the antecedent of those ideas. Those ideas came previously, thousands of years before the New Testament or so-called Old Testament was written. Thousands of years ago, the Kemau, the people of Kemet, had it down in this schema, in their ideas with regard to the wisdom and the will of Neter creating in the creation of the world, of the cosmos. And again, this is thousands and thousands of years before any of these Abrahamic religions or their texts came into being. And that's fascinating for me. One of the things as well I like that he talks about on page 69, he talks about how all aspects of creation, all aspects of the universe operate on the basis of duality and equilibrium. And I want to read this passage because I think this has got some things to say with regard to how we consider even society, actually, relationships and so forth. He says this: the world, let's read this here. Yeah, all aspects, this is page 69, all aspects of reality are underlied by the principle of duality. Even at the original level of being, the subjective realm, the attributes of Neter are dualized into the material basis of the world, i.e. Nu, and the immaterial consciousness, i.e. Amun, Atem, which wills the world into being by inducing matter to assume forms, to go from sphere 0 to sphere 10. Each of these are in a state of inactivity or absolute equilibrium. Matter is undifferentiated and consciousness has nothing to perceive, and the will is inactive. The world is nothing else but an objective expression of this original duality and equilibrium. And he says, on the surface, of course, the dual relationships are hard to trace beyond the obvious polarities of male, female, positive and negative charges, and so forth. The same can be said for the principle of equilibrium. Disorder seems to be the law more than the exception. Simply stated, the chief Kemetic divine law states that 1, all things, units or wholes, are dual, or each pole, sex charge, is half of a unit, or that each thing represents half or part of a larger whole. And then 2, the elements or the halves of a set of duality must be maintained in equilibrium with each other. For example, the maleness of men is not due to 100% presence of male hormones, as men possess female hormones, which makes them dual in nature. The preponderance of male hormones and other factors in men makes them unbalanced in their perspective in life and social actions. The same must be said of women. The two must come together. Stop sharing here. The two must come together to combine the essences of their genders to create a balanced perspective on life. The imbalance applies only to men and women who have not developed the higher part of their being, which is balanced in nature. Throughout the rest of this book, we will have opportunities to look at many of the significant duality in our lives and the world. What we must understand at this point is that the world is held together by a law that is based on the equilibrated dual nature of all things, wholes or units. But I love that. Basically, talking about this Tehuti, talking about the wisdom of creation of this universe that we're in, that's drawing my attention to the fact that everything is about complementarity. Everything is about duality. Everything is about relationship, and that feeds into I think Ra Un Nefer might talk about it in this book, but that feeds into concepts such as Ubuntu, I am because we are. In the African, African conceptualization of existence, of life, of social life, it's not about, oh, I'm just one atomized individual and here's another atomized individual and we do our own thing and we just go for self. No, we are, our traditional way of seeing things before we got corrupted by other ways of seeing things from other places was about relationship, was about complementarity, about relationship between us and our environment, relationship between us and one another. So that's something that Ra Un Nefer Amen talks about, focuses on with regard to this, Tehuti, the wisdom of creation, duality and equilibrium, balance. That kind of relates a little bit to Ma'at as well, doesn't it? And he does talk about that a little bit in the book. But then the third sphere, we'll go a little bit more quickly, just to kind of outline some of these other spheres, what these other spheres are relating to. So there we are. Yeah. So here is the Tree of Life as well. So anyway, it goes on and on and on. Read chapter 4 of Ra Un Nefer Amen's book, Metu Neter Vol.2. Read it for again, you can get it the PDF free online. Each of these spheres, elaborates and explains aspects of creation. So sphere 3 is about the word, the speaking of creation into existence. Spheres 4, 5, and 6 are about, Ra Un Nefer Amen describes them as being the principles which govern the existence, creation. So Ma'at is, as you know, the law, the order. Therein is contained the divine law, the divine order through which everything must operate. Everything must abide by, rather. So you can see the relationship between Ma'at and Tehuti in that regard, but I'm sure as I read more and study more in this book, I'll see the differentiation between them. Herukuti is the power, the enforcement of Ma'at in creation. So this deity here, Herukuti, who is an aspect of Heru, is about the maintenance of the order. Herukuti is also about cutting off the upper levels, the higher faculties, higher levels of man, actually, from the lower levels of man. And let me just have a look here. Let me just read how he says it here. He says, so Herukuti enforces the rules of the universe, basically, and he also says that Herukuti is about cutting off the higher levels from the lower levels, the upper realms of the universe from the lower realms of the universe. Heru now is the will, corresponds to the will of man, and also corresponds with the sort of the, what do you call it, the persuasiveness. Whereas Herukuti is like by force, enforces Ma'at. Heru is about let's read it here, that a coordinator. He says, it's possible for Heru to be in the lower world, but to be of the upper, which allows it to function as the coordinator of the activities of the various divine intelligences. So Herikuti is about force. Heru is about persuasion, and then you've got the lowest trilogy, if you like, the lowest portion of the Tree of Life are sphere 7, Heteru, sphere 8, Sebek, and sphere 9, or Set. And Ra Un Nefer Amen says that these so-called deities are directly in charge of the work of creating physical entities and events. Spheres 4, 5, and 6 kind of govern creation. Spheres 7, 8, 9 actually do the creation. And then sphere 10 is Geb. Sphere 10 is the actual physical manifestation of the universe. And so that's the cosmological kind of angle. The cosmological angle of the Tree of Life is broken down there in the Paut Neteru there. But the important thing to say again is that yes, that is wonderful philosophical musings, you could say, with regard to how the universe came into being, how the universe continues to exist through the attributes of God, the attributes of Neter. However, the more important thing is what I then discuss in the next video. The next video, I've already recorded it actually. The next video I talked about, I started going through how those elements of those spheres in the Tree of Life, how those spheres in the Tree of Life now apply to us as humans. And you'll see in my next video, I'll put a link in the description below actually, that, you know, starting from the bottom there, you know, we all start down here. Geb is the physical body and also the sensory body. We're, you know, ruled by our emotions and feelings and elements around us and so forth. Our Set is the learning faculty, you know, and then you've got Heteru as which is the imagination. Sebek, which is Sebek is the verbal portion of our being, the portion of our being that is very outward looking, looks at surface level things, break things up, left brain. Whereas Heteru is the right brain, which is about visual, seeing the wholeness. 6 is the human will, which can be dominated by the lower portions of our being, but can also be led by Ma'at and the higher portions of our being. You got Ma'at, which is the right brain, upper right brain faculty of being able to see things, the connection between things based on their intrinsic values and so forth, and the complementarity between things like I was talking about. Herikuti is about the dividing things according to their intrinsic values and dividing things not according to outward superficial things, but dividing things and discriminating according to, you could say, righteous judgment. And I talked about all those in the next video. So watch that video next, even though it's been recorded already. And then in the next video, I'm going to talk about now the highest levels of our being, which are these levels here, which we share actually with Neter, which are Osar, Tehuti, and Seket. So that is it. That is my explanation based on Ra Un Nefer Amen's book, Metu Neter Vol.2, Onuk Osar. That's my explanation of the Kemetic Tree of Life, Paut Neteru. Hope you found that of interest. Hope that you know, I hope that motivates some people to maybe get the book, get the PDF, start looking through it. Really look forward to any ideas, any thoughts, any insights that anyone might have with regard to some of these thoughts. Like I said, these videos are basically my diary of reading through this book right here, which has, you know, had a real big impact on me already. Actually, so as we continue to go through this book, as we continue to go through the chapters, my hope is that I'll be able to kind of trace my progress and my development, my ascension to being more in tune with my true identity, if you like. And I hope to kind of record that in these videos as well, to some extent. So thank you for watching, everyone. Peace out, peace and blessings to each and every one of y'all. Hope you had a wonderful winter solstice. For those of you who celebrate Christmas and Kwanzaa and New Year, wish you all a wonderful all of those things, and see you next time. All right, peace.